What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's up, Fantasy Points? This is Outside the Box, week 14 of season 2 of Outside the Box, pretty deep into the season. I am, of course, happy to be here with my good friend, master of dank stats, Scott Barrett. Scott, this is about as impactful of a week. Like every year, week 14 is like the most impactful week of the season for like, are you going to get into playoffs in your season long for best ball, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have any like awesome sweats going on this week, or are you not even like paying close enough attention because you're too in the weeds in this stuff?
I'm too all in on DFS, Neil. That's what the show is about. We're trying to rebound after a rough week 13, let's say. I went all out. I rocked the mustache, shaved it off. I don't deserve it. That health insurance CEO got shot and someone tweeted out, wrong CEO died. Should have been the one who touted Adonai Mitchell.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was actually Neil Orfield who tweeted that out, so don't feel too bad.
I got tweeted at on Sunday last week. Somebody tweeted at me, nice call on 80 Mitchell. You know, and it's like I feel like every sharp person was on 80 Mitchell
and pointed them in the right direction. Yeah, sorry for thinking he would score points, but we're not going to pull it up. But if you look at the 5-5-5 Millie, just about every player or every single player in that lineup was someone I wrote about or talked about on this show. And so I'm wondering, I feel like I was massively over levered last week. And I feel like I've been over levered for like, I don't know, 5 years now. So something to keep in mind, I guess, when we talk about this show. And, you know, when you ask me about the chalk, I'll weigh pros and cons, but you're the game theory experts, Neil. So you can tell me how all in I should go on a fade or a call, such as a low own. I mean, David Moore didn't do anything. Whatever. I like the upside there. Anyway, we're on to week 14.
I think ultimately the 80 Mitchell call, like it didn't work out because he dropped he had I think one in the end zone that he could have had a touchdown.
Well, it was also like you can never have like too high a level of confidence in any Anthony Richardson receiver. Like there were 12 completions in that game, and yeah, he had an end zone target, he had a deep shot, he dropped, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever. David Moore didn't kill us anyway. I'm week to week. I just like forget what happened on the previous week unless things went like totally awesome, and then I'll remember what went well. but last week it was Jalen Hurts. Is what I'm remembering now. Is I was all in on the Eagles passing game. I thought finally they have a total pass funnel. This is going to be the week that it's going to be the passing game instead of the running game, and it looked okay early on, and then just in the end it was like, yep, Saquon Barkley 25-yard touchdown to ice the game.
Well, I always say like how the pros view a slate, where it's like the hits submit on their lineups, and then they embrace the notion that they just like lost all their money. Like you lose most weeks, and then you have the big hits. When you do win, you win in a big way to separate yourself from the field. So it was almost like a good thing where last week almost nothing went right, at least with my own lineups. But
yeah, hopefully like, you know, you can correlate like everything goes right one week and then wrong the next week, you know, and then you just, because that's how you win the money.
That's what JM to win always says. You want to finish either first or last. It's like the Ricky Bobby way, right?
I don't know that I agree with that, because like I'd rather cash than not cash, but I mean, that's kind of how you play. Like that's how you build, is off the wall. Yeah. All right. Are you excited about tonight's UFC slate? I just see didn't see Scott on Go Poda. I think that's the UFC thing, right?
Yeah, that's my UFC podcast. We only have like 12 listeners, so shout out to Stefan or Steven. I think it's Pantoja. Very excited to watch these fights. Great card. I gotta get back on track here at DFS. So no more UFC talk. That's why I wasn't on the show. I had to buckle down.
All right.
I gotta earn my mustache back.
Let's go. Let's earn that mustache back. The chalk, we have three. There's kind of big separation here. The top three: Sam Darnold, 14%; Will Levis, 13%; Kyler Murray, 12%. Do you have a favorite of these three? Anybody that you are totally off of? How do you feel about the chalk?
Yeah, this doesn't feel like great chalk to me. I wrote up Sam Darnold as the cash play, nuts matchup. He doesn't stand out to me as like a particularly great play, and I think he's better than Levis or Kyler. Bryce Young was one of the first quarterbacks I wrote up last week. He ultimately didn't make it into the final publication of my article. but like, yeah, it's the perfect matchup. You see this happening. The price is great, but it's also a guy who has scored over 20 fantasy points, once in his career, twice in his career, if you count his first game when, we sort of mocked him, and then he, had that great debut and has basically done nothing since. And then Kyler Murray is just someone like, I don't know. I don't have any level of confidence in being able to predict when he's going to go off. It just seems to be totally random, and it's happening far less frequently than in any other season of his career. This is one of the most run-heavy offenses in football this year. Is one of the top 3 most run-heavy offenses last year. They've come out more pass-heavy after the bye. I don't know how much I really believe in that. So to me, like, I think you're going to want some Sam Darnold onslaughts. Will Levis, I totally get it. Just like perfect matchup for him and his receivers. But me, with the quarterback position, I do like to get unique. And last week was actually a pretty good week for it. Justin Herbert chalk flopped. And like I said, I talked about Bryce Young. I wrote up Jaden Daniels and some other stuff. So I kind of feel good about the spots where we can get unique at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and I think I'm largely on the same page. Like, I think the chalk all looks fine. Like, I think, yes, certainly Darnold could get there. Will Levis can get there at 5,000. Great matchup. Kyler Murray, I mean, I loved this matchup a few weeks ago, and it totally flopped. But I think I'll probably be going back to this game a good amount. But to me, nothing stands. Like, last week was a week that I was a bit more like way over the field on certain plays. This week, I don't really see anything that I'm like, I love this so much, I need to be slamming it. Maybe by the end of the show, I'll get there. You'll convince me on some stack. But currently it's like, yeah, the plays that I like are all getting some ownership. They're not like 2% owned, but I'll probably be overweight on some of them. But let's get into some of those other plays. See if you can make me more confident in some of them that I am not as interested in. I have some leans here, but want to hear your thoughts. Maybe I just open it up to you at this point. So we just have those 3 that are real tough.
You keep trying to just open it up to me, and I keep shutting you down. But no, I think this is like the perfect spot for it. We got to talk Jameis Winston. If Jameis Winston was on the main slate last week, I would have won all the money. And so something I talk about when we were doing best ball drafts or in redraft, I talk about power law players. So like Saquon Barkley's win rate in best ball, that is a power law player. Just like there are power law players, there are power law offenses. Cleveland is a power law passing offense where if you look at catchable air yards per game, this with Jameis Winston, Brown's offense is like historically great. It's 25% better than the next closest team, which is Joe Burrow. And then it's 40% better than the next closest team after that, which is Geno Smith and the Seahawks. And what does that mean? Obviously, Jameis Winston has potential, has upside, but it's when we're talking quarterbacks and DFS and a GPP show, we care about the stack. And this stack has massive potential. You saw that last week with Jerry Jeudy having nearly 250 receiving yards. But it's also, since Winston took over, you see Elijah Moore, top 5 in XFP per game. You see David Njoku, top 3 at his position in XFP per game. So there's tremendous upside there. The issue is it's an absolute worst possible matchup. Couldn't get any worse than this matchup. Still, this is tournaments that we just talked about. You want to position yourself to finish first or last. It's not how often you win. It's how much you win when you're right. And to me, Jameis Winston stacks are positioning you in such a way where hopefully they can do what Cincinnati did last week, right? And really push them. It's tough because not only is this an elite defense, but it's also an offense that really slows the clock down, reduces play volume, stuff like that. But, maybe this fails to hit far more often than it hits. I just like the upside when it does hit.
Yeah, it's one of those where like I see it and I'm sort of scared away by the matchup. And I think a lot of people are going to be scared away by the matchup, but he's just been so like pass heavy, like regardless of the matchup, that probably isn't something that should be scaring us as much as it naturally does for me. So yeah, I think Winston looks
I mean, Denver's, so what Winston did last week against Denver was insane. Denver came into the week leading the league in EPA per dropback allowed. They've given up just one game over 18 fantasy points to a quarterback all year, just 2 to wide receivers. And then we all saw what happened.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Like he seems to be doing it against every defense, regardless of how strong they are. Who else do you like?
AOC stands out to me as a phenomenal play. So the way I wrote it up was initially just like I had this like super flowery blurb, and then Jake was like, yeah, you're going to have to change the wording on this when he comes in as Mega Chalk and remind people that he sucks. And he just didn't. It was Will Levis who came in over him, but you look at the fantasy points per dollar, they're basically the same. And that's kind of how I view it too, is they're basically the same, except AOC has, half as much ownership. And so just like what Jameis did against Denver, AOC just had this tremendous performance against the Chiefs, who hadn't given up a game over 275 passing yards all year. He had a 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions line against them, 9.7 yards per attempt, far and away the highest. And now he gets like a perfect matchup. Like Russell Wilson was another one of those, the quarterbacks that was on last week, where it's this deep into the season, you get into the weeds of where it's like, some like just defenses are as bad as elite quarterbacks, where it's just like opposing quarterback versus Bengals is as good as like almost Joe Burrow. Not really, but it's the same thing with the Buccaneers defense. And so really like this spot for AOC. He also shreds the blitz. Tampa blitzes at the highest rate of any defense. And of course we have to talk about the stack here, because that's what's really important. And so the Raiders are sort of like the Bengals in that they're just funneling everything to their 2 primary receivers. Since week 4, Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, both ranked top 15 in yardage market share, top 15 in yards per game. Only Higgins and Chase are the only other duo who can say that. They're popping as top values this week. So I really like AOC dub stacks. I think that's cheap. I think that's a lot safer than the field would give credit for. And I think there's upside there as well.
Yep. Yeah. Top in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed per game to quarterbacks over the top 5 weeks. I think they were like second on the entire season. So yeah, phenomenal spot there for AOC.
And then you also look at wide receivers there, and you see Jacoby Myers, all green. And then maybe not so much for Bowers, but they're down their best safety and his direct backup.
Yep. And still not that bad. Okay. Who else? Let's continue on. I mean, I have a name in mind that I really want to hear your thoughts on, but I'm just going to let you keep going on your some of your plays that you like.
Yeah, I'm going to just keep hyping up Baker Mayfield in this space. And so
that was
like
one
of those.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. It's one of those things where like he was making us a lot of money, and then I don't know, last 3 weeks they've really shifted to a more run heavy approach. He went from top 7 in pass rate over expectation to bottom 7. Mayfield had like 85% of the touchdowns, and now it's like a 50-50 split. But I mean, the dude has 2 more games with 27 fantasy points as any other quarterback on the slate. He's done that with Mike Evans missing a bunch of time. It's a really good matchup. If you look at schedule adjusted, it looks like a pass funnel-ish matchup. And so again, it's like the Jameis thing, where it's just like, hey, what if they just revert back to previous pass tendencies? He could easily be a slate wrecker at a 6,400 price tag and low ownership.
To your point, 5th in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed over the past 5 weeks to quarterbacks. And then you look at running backs, and it's -3. So I'm not going to count it out, but it's not a great matchup for running backs here, bottom 10. So yeah, total pass funnel based on schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. All right, who else?
Caleb Williams, we should talk about. Since this, offensive play caller change, he ranks 4th in fantasy points. And again, it's a little bit like the Jameis Winston thing, where volume is great. Bears were ranking dead last in catchable air yards per game. Over this stretch, they would rank top 10. We just saw DJ Moore break the slate. All their running backs are hurt. Not a great matchup against the 49ers, but it's, again, the value of that stack relative to price and upside is pretty attractive to me. I also wrote up Tua. Tua, I think, is an awesome play. He, over his last 3 games, 323 passing yards per game, 3 touchdowns per game, nearly 27 DraftKings fantasy points per game with a league high 124 passer rating. The matchup you could go kind of back and forth on. I don't think it's as tough as it looks. Since week 7, they ranked 4th worst in fantasy points per dropback allowed, 4th worst in schedule adjusted over the last 5 weeks. A lot of that is to quarterbacks on the ground, which isn't Tua. But I mean, maybe this defense is sort of quiet quitting. The head coach kind of threw them under the bus a few weeks back. Sauce Gardner's out. But anyway, Tua's just like rolling. And he has Jonnu Smith putting up Tyreek Hill like production. He's not at all priced like Tyreek Hill. So if you wanted to do a stack with Jonnu and Achane, I think that's great. Or if you wanted to get a little more off the wall for like a Millie, maybe Waddle against this quarter's coverage. I think that he crushes quarters coverage throughout his career. I think that's intriguing. But yeah, Tua really stood out to me. We know he has slate wrecking potential, and the stack's a lot cheaper.
You've kind of convinced me. I think Tua is one that I had not written up at all, but like super low owned, multiple defenders out on the Jets defense. I think that makes a lot of sense. All right. Do you want me to throw names at you, or do you have anybody else you want to talk about?
That was kind of really it. Jalen Hurts as Saquon leverage. Argument there is like we saw in week 8, the dude scored 35 fantasy points on just 20 pass attempts. Barkley flopped in that game. And in week 10, 32 fantasy points on 20 pass attempts. Barkley had 8.8. And so it's just really a bet, like a calculated leverage play off of Barkley, and then a bet that he's the one who scores multiple rushing touchdowns. And so like on paper, it's a great matchup. And perhaps more importantly, like you look at the spread, it's one in which the Eagles are going to have a ton of red zone drives, amazing starting field position, which might matter more for a guy who really the bulk of his fantasy potential comes from those tush push rushing touchdowns.
Yeah. That was one that I was definitely curious to hear your thoughts on Jalen Hurts. And I could see him coming in lower than 5% too, just because of the pricing, because everybody wants to go to Saquon. Like it just makes a lot of sense to go to Saquon here against the Panthers, but could get weird. I could see that going the right way. What about Kirk Cousins? He's only 5,500 coming back to Minnesota for a Remember Me game, getting low owned. Drake London, pretty cheap. Any interest there?
Yeah, I mean, there's upside to that in that game, which certainly could go off. Matchup looks right. To me, I watched that game. Cousins has 0 touchdowns to 6 interceptions over his last 3 games. He's just awful. Like that was the worst game I've ever seen him play. To Kirk's credit though, like he's one who like always immediately bounces back. Like his worst ever games are always immediately followed by his best games. And you have the revenge narrative. Yeah. But to me, it was like watching that game. It's just like, how do you not give the ball to Bijan Robinson every single play this week? And that's basically what it seemed like the coach speak said. So I don't know. He hasn't done anything against non-Buccaneers opponents. So like, I'm hesitant to buy into it, but I think that's a fine Millie play.
Okay. Yeah, Derek Carr. I don't know if I'm that excited about it. It's only 5,100, 1% owned though. Nice matchup. Any interest there?
No, not really. Crazy stat is like he ranks like 6th in fantasy points per dropback. But I mean, he just kind of has no one to throw the ball to now. I think he can just play Kamara and soak up, 80% of the production.
Yeah. Geno Smith. I feel like he was like we played a lot of Geno Smith a few weeks back in that dud of a game. But he's 5,800, not getting a ton of ownership. Any interest?
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Arizona's defense. I think that's a really tough matchup, but yeah, he could get there just on raw pass volume. I don't know. He was leading the league in passing yards per game up until last week. And there's upside to that stack.
Yeah. Chris Oster wants to know, would you combine Hurts with Saquon?
I wouldn't. That's like one of the biggest negative correlations in DFS right now.
Yeah, probably not a great idea. All right, let's move on to running backs. So we're looks like Fantasy Points already projecting Kenneth Walker out and Zach Charbonnet to be the chalk.
Well, no. So Chris isn't projecting Walker out, but it looks like Darren, who does our ownership projections, is.
Okay.
So like if Walker were out, that fantasy points per dollar would shoot up to like 3.6 for Charbonnet. He would be the best running back play of the slate. And yeah, probably Uber chalk.
Yeah, I mean I didn't even look at the fantasy points, just looked at the ownership projection because he's not getting 40% with Kenneth Walker in. But yeah, looks like the ownership projecting Zach Charbonnet out. We have 2 games this year with Kenneth Walker out. Zach Charbonnet scored 19.8 half PPR fantasy points per game in those games, 21.8 PPR fantasy points per game in those games. So I take it that he would be your favorite of the cheap running backs because we have Guerendo, Braylon Allen, and Charbonnet all like really value plays here. Charbonnet would be your favorite.
For cash, like I don't think it's close. You're looking at a 92% snap share. That's what he had without Walker. If you're looking for like arguments against from a tournament perspective, Seattle's offensive line has really regressed. Like I think Walker would be having like a league wrecking season if Seattle didn't have like arguably like bottom 2 offensive line. But still, like you factor all that in, it's just, what was it? 16 carries, 5 targets per game, 21.8 PPR fantasy points per game. It's just like an awesome play. So for tournaments, it's really, to me, it's just like, well, yeah, I was going to say Braylon Allen and Isaac Guerendo would draw a fraction of the ownership, but they're still top 4.
Yeah, they're all getting ownership.
Maybe Connor as leverage. I didn't write him up, but if this happens, and again, this is a hypothetical, even then he's involved in the passing game to a high degree.
Let's start by just ranking those 3: Braylon Allen, Isaac Guerendo, Zach Charbonnet for tournaments. Sounds like Zach Charbonnet is at least your favorite for cash games, and it's kind of hard to rank in that sense because then you're looking at like, well, here's my favorite in terms of like, I think he's going to score the most, but then you factor in ownership. It always gets a little bit more complicated. So I understand that ranking players like this is tough, but like in terms of what you're expecting from the players, like if you just ignore ownership, looking at the salaries, like factoring in salary, not factoring in ownership, who's your favorite of Charbonnet, Guerendo, Allen? How would you rank those 3?
Yeah, Charbonnet 1, not close. 2, because we're delving with like median projection way higher for sure. And then I would give it to Guerendo and then Allen. I think it's pretty close between Guerendo and Allen. Allen's like, he looked awesome. He was like a training camp darling. And then he like forced a committee through the first month of the season with Breece Hall, and like his efficiency metrics are great. Since then, he's fallen under a 4.0 yards per carry in every single game. He ranks like bottom 5 in all key efficiency metrics. This offense looks dead. He didn't catch passes in college. And so he's game script sensitive. I think he's more talented than Guerendo. Guerendo, I said, was, super raw coming out of college, a freak athlete, like one of the top 10 most athletic running backs to participate in the combine of this new millennium. But like still pretty raw, but like that doesn't really matter as much in a Kyle Shanahan scheme. So, really good explosive playability. Even with Trent Williams out, I have confidence in Kyle Shanahan as just like a genius god who just turns UDFA running backs into, I don't know, DFS week winners. So yeah, extreme value. I get it. I would say I'd much rather play Kamara. I mean, like that's not kind of the thesis you're making, but I think Kamara, if we're still talking cash, is like is an absolute must.
So would you be disinclined to play all three of the value running backs?
Yeah.
You'd rather like mix in
if we're talking like cash, like I need Kamara in there for sure.
Yeah. What about in tournaments though? Like in tournaments, would you be okay with playing all of Charbonnet, Garendo, and Braylon Allen, or would you still like rather mix in a Kamara or a Saquon Barkley or a James Conner or whatever, what have you?
Yeah, I think you could try that for a unique build. And like looking at it now, actually, like I could see Najee smashing Garendo or Allen very easily. He's coming off of the best usage he's seen all season. And then like Najee plus Steelers defense is like the most obvious stack of all time. We could see Jameis throwing multiple pick sixes so easily, right?
Right. We've seen. Did he have multiple? Yeah, he had multiple last week, right?
And the Steelers had multiple last week.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, easy to envision that. Before we move down into some of those other, let's just talk about Kamara and Barkley. Do you have we're projecting here 30% ownership going to Kamara at 8,000. No Taysom Hill should mean more usage there. Saquon Barkley 9,000, but not match up against Carolina. How do you like Saquon at 18% and or Kamara at 30%? Would you play them in the same lineup? Do you have a preference?
It's just really hard to fit them in the same lineup. So Kamara is definitely safer, definitely the better cash play. He has a season high of 47 DraftKings fantasy points in games he's scored at least one touchdown, 30.5 in games he hasn't. Like he hasn't scored a touchdown in a number of weeks now, but like you look at his totals, like he would be wrecking leagues if he was scoring touchdowns. No Taysom Hill obviously helps that. I think a bigger influence, honestly, is New Orleans is getting all their healthy offensive linemen back for the first time since week 3 this week. No Dexter Lawrence for the Giants. It's a great matchup. It's so hard to beat that safety that he provides, and then also upside. And with Saquon, it's like no one's touching his slate wrecking upside. So he's 9K, which like honestly is cheap because he's having like the Christian McCaffrey season based on raw production. And, McCaffrey was what, 10,500. He's not having the Christian McCaffrey usage, but the production is there. The spike weeks are there. It was something like he's hit, I don't know, like 30 DraftKings fantasy points in nearly 50% of his games, with like 3 more than all other running backs combined. It was a stat like that. Now he faces the absolute perfect nuts matchup against the Panthers. Doesn't get better for any running back than that. Concern really would be Jalen Hurts vulturing goal line touchdowns. They could shut him down at halftime like they did against the Cowboys. I know you and Jake talked about him pushing to break the rushing yardage record. It doesn't really seem like that's something he cares about, where he just wants team wins now. And he's letting himself get pulled out early in games. But I mean, with Saquon, it's like, does he rip off a 90-yard run or not? Like,
right. Every game so far, yes.
He can get 250 rushing yards in this game.
If you want, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, if he wants to, he could put up 250 easily, and not easily, but like certainly could get there. Just a matter of like, what's the motivation here? If they're up 3 touchdowns at halftime, like at what point do the rest their starters? And he would be the easiest one to rest too. Like it's harder to rest your quarterback, but like Saquon, like just throwing Kenneth Gainwell, you're doing just fine without Saquon. So that is the only concern there. All right. Well, outside of those, I mean, now we can get into some more contrarian options here. You already talked about Najee Harris a bit. He's getting 17%. Bucky Irving, assuming he is able to go, 6,600, 13% ownership. How do you like that?
I think it's strong. I like betting on Baker for his upside, I think is great. I think you could do the exact same thing with Bucky Irving, who has hit season highs in back-to-back weeks with insane efficiency. This was a player I was all over in like best ball season long. I said he was this year's Kyron Williams. Freakishly efficient. Production's been there. I know we talked about Raiders looking like a pass funnel in recent weeks, but I don't know how much I buy into that. I just think their defense is weak everywhere. And so it's like, if Tampa's recent shift more towards the run sticks, really good value, week winning upside. I think he's a strong play. I do worry that he's been seriously banged up all week. I think he's officially questionable to play. Maybe only got in one limited practice. So maybe you see more Rachaad White this week. Not my favorite tournament play, but he's strong.
All right. Who do you like then of the non-chalk? And it's tough week because there's good chalk here, but like, are you planning on going heavily on anybody else?
I feel like I can get away from Garendo and Allen, and really like the reason being is like I do like these other guys.
Yeah.
And I would put Tony Pollard there. I think he's an extreme value. He played on 72% of the team snaps last week with Tajay Spears healthy. That was the first game all season above, I think, 60% with Spears healthy. So you might be seeing them lean more towards into Pollard as the bell cow. There's good upside there. In 4 games without Spears, he averages over 100 rushing yards per game, top 2 in XFP per game, and it's a great matchup. You get some leverage on Will Levis. Could just be you could stack him up with Titans defense. Could be a game where the Titans pull away. I really like Bijan Robinson. I just said like they should just give him the ball every single touch. He's scored 21 DraftKings fantasy points in 6 of his last 7 games, and his usage has never been better. We talked about this last week. Career high 32 touches last week. Tyler Algier is no longer involved in near end zone usage. Not a great matchup, but it's just like insanely talented player, really productive player, seeing the best volume of his career. And I could see that happening again this week.
Yep. And only 10% ownership at 7,500 looks pretty good. DeAndre Swift, what's the latest on Swift? Is he expected to play? I know he's been like held out of practice all week.
Yeah, he's officially questionable in this practice Wednesday, Thursday, limited on Friday. It seemed like he was going to play. Roshan Johnson's out. And so that's just big for him. Because Roshan was stealing a lot of the near end zone work, which really capped him. But you saw earlier in the season, he had that 6 string of 5 straight games with 21 plus DraftKings fantasy points, top 5 matchup, 49ers defense riddled with injuries. That's another guy you could stack up with Chicago's defense. I think he's pretty strong.
Yep. Who else?
Aaron Jones right below him. I got skewered for touting Aaron Jones last week. I had so much exposure to Aaron Jones. Listen, if you fumble the ball on back-to-back drives, like you're not going to touch it again for a while. And that's exactly what happened. And so again, this is another one of those bets where it's like vast range of outcomes, but that's something you want to lean into for tournaments. And so it's just, hey, Cam Akers stinks. They let him score that touchdown in the final drive of the game. Maybe that was like an amends making touchdown. And so like, what if he's the bell cow? He's not priced like a bell cow. And so that might be something worth leaning into for tournaments.
Yep. We have a lot of people want to know your thoughts on James Cook.
Yeah, and people asking about Josh Allen too. I just really didn't get a great read on it. You saw the split last week where it was like 50-50 and like a snow game. I don't know how much that matters. Cook is one of those guys who just seems to like never projects well and seems to just pop off randomly. So I don't have a great read on it. And people asking about Josh Allen too. It's like, well, he's been more productive in recent weeks. Nothing really stands out of him being a good play, but you just never know with these MVP candidates this late in the season. Like maybe Allen just wants to flex on everyone, has 5 touchdowns this week. That could happen. It just like based on the analytics, I wouldn't say Cook or Allen really stand out, but at 1%, certainly the upside's there.
Anybody else that you really like, or should I ask you about some that I'm curious on?
Well, for sure, Devon Achane, who's just been like a monster in every game that two was played, really high floor, great due to basically being like the wide receiver 2 in this offense. He's failed to reach 20 fantasy points in only 1 of 8 games with Tua. And so like the one knock on him is that he's splitting inside the 10 work with Raheem Mostert, but Mostert is questionable with a hip injury, and he's like barely he's only practiced in a limited capacity all week. So I think we could see a little bit more Achane with that, and on the ground against the Jets defense that looks a bit like a run funnel. So, he is priced up to where he's no longer a screaming value, but like shouldn't be 5%.
Yeah, seems like pretty good play at 5%. Who else do you like?
I don't know that there's anyone that really stands out to me.
Okay. Yeah, HN was the one that I was most interested in hearing your thoughts on. Let's see who else. If anybody in chat wants to know about any specific players, of course, feel free to ask as well. Oh, Tyrone Tracy. It's kind of intriguing to me at 5,800. Any interest there?
Yeah, I tried to think about like him plus Giants D as leverage off of Saints, but I don't know. I just, you're seeing Singletary get more touches. You're not seeing Tracy get targets. So he's very game script sensitive. It is a good matchup, and like he's a good player I love. So like he could get there. That's just not one of the plays I typically make. I had one for you that I thought I wrote up. I thought long and hard about it. I think it's a little too galaxy brained, or Neil, it could be the best leverage play ever.
Kenneth Gainwell?
Kendre Miller.
Oh, that's interesting.
I feel like it's one of those things where it hits 1 out of 35 times, but when it does hit, it hits in typically a very impactful way. And it would just be like leverage off of Kamara. One of the Saints beat writers said Kendre's trending towards a return, and
I saw like all gas or something like that.
Yeah, all
like,
gas, no breaks.
Yeah.
He said Kamara is going to get the vast majority of the snaps, but all gas, no breaks in terms of workload for Kendre. I don't know. I didn't write him up. Like he didn't make my final publish, but I thought about it as like, this is outside the box, right?
Yeah, that's honestly had not crossed my mind. It's an interesting thought. What's his price? Kendre
4,000.
Yeah, if he's 4,000, I think that's.
It felt like a Neil play.
It feels kind of like a Neil play. I just the only issue for me is like I haven't seen anything like I'm like, is there any chance that he gets more than 8 carries with as long as Kamara's healthy?
I mean, there's maybe like a little narrative here where it's, I mean, like Taysom was getting carries, right?
True.
And Jamal Williams stinks. Like he's just a locker room guy. He's an awesome locker room, but he stinks. And there's like a little bit of a narrative here that perhaps Kendre going on IR was like partially one of the reasons why the head coach got fired, because the head coach just like inexplicably hated Kendre's guts. And the interim head coach was like, yeah, that was weird. He didn't need to go on IR. He was fully healthy. And he's kind of like hinted at this and has hyped up Kendre a little bit. But ultimately this is just like a super gal brain play.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's a Millie only, like
it's like the Noah Gray play, but less likely to hit.
Yeah, it's very much like don't play it in anything except for fields with hundreds of thousands of people in it. But in those fields, I think that it's viable. Like almost everything's viable in those fields, but I can kind of squint and see it there with Kendre. I don't totally hate that. Sincere McCormick, we're getting some questions about McCormick and or Abdullah. Any interest in either of them?
Yeah, I don't think he is in play, especially not any longer with these 5K backups turn starters.
What about Kyron? I mean, just looking at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, it's the second best matchup over the past 5 weeks for running backs. Kind of a run funnel. Any interest in Kyron here?
I mean, could be. He doesn't get receiving work anymore. So that's plus 2.4, that 4.3.
Yeah.
And then it's like, so Buffalo's run defense is one of the worst, and it's been one of the worst. This might be due to design, like the way they sell out to stop the deep ball. They've always done this, and sort of invite the run, but it's a game script thing where it's like you can have analytically the worst run defense, but like when you're Buffalo and you're putting up a ton of points and the Rams are trailing, like you can't really be as run heavy as you want to. You can't take advantage of that matchup.
Yeah. I don't think there were any other running backs that I felt strongly that I need your opinion on. Thank you. I think we've talked about all of them that I have like any significant interest in. Just want to double check myself here. Yeah, and I think we got to all the questions for people. I mean, we hit on most of these running backs. We're really efficient today, Scott. We're only 40 minutes in. We're through quarterbacks and running backs. Do you want to take your intermission?
I'll take a very quick one just to, I did the thing with the AC again. And so I'm burning up.
Scott's going to go turn on the AC. I will remind you, no longer Black Friday, but you can still get extremely discounted fantasy points, and you can use promo code OTB25 on already discounted prices for the rest of the season. All the things that we're looking at, and I have not even really been looking at it much today. This, I believe, is scheduled just as free, but the data suite, of course, is just groundbreaking, really, really cool tool that I use constantly. I think anybody who is serious about looking into their stats themselves should be checking out the data suite, because it's just a really easy way to look deeply into all the stats. I just saw my friend Ship My Money today retweeted Ryan Heath, because Ryan Heath had put out a tweet looking through the data suite, really digging into the stats. And especially if you're doing things like Underdog, like if you're playing the battle royales on Underdog, really great way to get ahead of the field there. If you can look at the stats before projections are out, before all the different sites have put out their projections, you can see how are things trending for different running game usage, how are receivers doing, et cetera, et cetera. So I highly recommend it for anybody who is serious about fantasy sports. And of course, use promo code OTB25 for 25% off. Chris asked me how you do on Thursday Night Football. Went pretty poorly for me, despite as much as I loved Tim Patrick and I ended up loving Christian Watson, like on a lot of the good plays. I only gave myself about 6 minutes to build lineups and ended up with only like 15% Josh Jacobs, which was not my intention, but that hurt quite a bit, not having much Josh Jacobs. Also ended up way over on Jaden Reed, even though I didn't love Jaden Reed, but ultimately made up for it with pick six. Just one hit in pick six made up for all the DFS and everything else going poorly. So felt good about it. Made money on the night overall, but that's basically just because I luck boxed a pick six. All right, Scott, I've done my little pitch. We talked a little bit about Thursday Night Football. Shanji says, yeah, is Swift going to play? I heard some talk about Homer. Currently unknown. I think that we're leaning towards Swift is playing. Scott, if Swift does end up sitting, would you have any interest in Travis Homer?
I don't think so. I think he would be sort of like Sincere McCormick tier, but
yeah,
he's viable.
Right. Yeah.
I think they kind of hate him. I think that was.
You think they hate Travis Homer? Okay. I mean, should they? Like, is he just not that good?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Has he ever? Because he's had spots where he was like randomly the RB1. I don't know that he's ever taken advantage of it.
He's had spots where he was randomly, allegedly the RB1, and then I don't know that he's ever actually been. I feel like he has been at some point. I feel like he had a good fantasy game at one point in his history, but
he had 2 starts and did 0 touchdowns, didn't really do anything. 9 and 10 carries.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Look at some wide receivers. And of course, we've already talked about the quarterbacks, so a lot of these will tie in. But Juwan Jennings, I mean, we didn't talk that much about Brock Purdy. Juwan Jennings is 5,200, getting 29% ownership. Do you think you'll get to 29% of Juwan Jennings in tournaments?
No, definitely not. I think Purdy's interesting.
Walker officially out. Sorry, we just got the news. Kenneth Walker officially out. So Zach Charbonnet wheels up.
Yeah, get ready for mega chalk week. And was doing some lineup analysis of like the top DFS players. They are very much just eating running back chalk, and that's something we've talked about for years. Is what's fragile chalk is like generally running backs are very good chalk. And wide receiver, especially like RB2s now thrust into RB1 roles, like a Charbonnet, especially one who catches passes like a Charbonnet, unlike potentially a Braylon Allen, Isaac Orendo. And then wide receiver chalk is more fragile. And I think that's the case with Juwan Jennings. Brock Purdy, I do think is interesting. So like Mike Clay was sort of like my mentor when I was starting out at PFF. We worked together. I really, there might not be anyone I respect more. Like if you're looking for free rankings, for sure Mike Clay has the best. And I was looking at his rankings. He had Brock Purdy as like QB4 on the week, not just on the slate, like on the week. That seemed really surprising to me, especially with Trent Williams out, all the issues they've been going through up against like a really good Bears defense. And so like, this is where I write the everything report every week, which is like a redraft, look back article at usage and volume. And I keep like victory lapping in there and then like taking L's on this show where you fade the chalk. And so it's like, yeah, Jennings is a cash play. He's a really good play. That's what I wrote up in Slate Breakdown. And in everything report, I said, Juwan Jennings, blow all your fab on him. I think he's going to be he has league winning potential. Really love him. And you're seeing that. But here on this show, 29%, I just, that seems way too high. Again, up against a really tough Chicago defense. It's also like a bad schematic matchup for him. And again, no left tackle. When Trent Williams hasn't played as well this year, but like last year it was, and this is like a Garendo point too, but Christian McCaffrey's yards before contact per attempt went from like second best in the league to like 22nd without Trent Williams. And then Brock Purdy went from best in the league in touchdown to interception ratio to like dead last. And so that with a number of other injuries, I don't feel, I think 29% is high. I also feel similarly about Drake London. I like Mooney as a leverage play. Again, we talked about how bad Kirk Cousins has been, how, maybe they can't do it against the Vikings, but should try and just give the ball to Bijan every play. And then it's, how much upside does Drake London have for tournaments? We're talking about tournaments. We're talking about ownership projections. And so I think he's a great cash play. I don't see the, like his upside doesn't strike fear into my heart.
All right. So, but you do like Mooney at just 6% ownership, 5,500 looks good to you?
Yeah, as a leverage play, he has the much better schematic matchup. I know Drake London has really started to separate himself these last few weeks. Last week, 16 targets. Mooney didn't do anything. But he was really awesome before that. It was like, only like 1.5 XFP or fantasy points per game separating the two of them. And so, especially if you think Atlanta trails, I like that.
Since we already went over Juwan Jennings, let's just talk about Debo real quick. Any interest? 5,900, only 8% ownership on Debo. Do you have any interest there?
No, he's just a total afterthought in this offense. Like without Brock Purdy, you'd think they would get him some design targets, right? And he had one, and it was his only catch the entire game. I think he's fat. Like I was told, he had that record-breaking season, and then I was told to fade him because he showed up out of shape, and that worked out well. And then he was awesome last year, and then this year you've seen the meme of him like just looking fat. So there's no other way for me to, justify how poor his usage and performance has been. So I'm just going to run with that narrative, and he's not going to find his way into my pool this week.
All right, fair enough. Jacoby Myers. I assume you're not going to any other receiver on Las Vegas. But Jacoby Myers 5,600. You're kind of already talked about your love for Aiden O'Connell. I assume Jacoby Myers is going to be in some of those lineups.
Yeah, I love him. Dude, he's just been awesome. And like I called it like discount Bengals, where this offense just flows through Jacoby and Bowers. It's a great matchup for both of them. Really a top 3 matchup, and the dude has just been rock solid despite some brutal matchups, and now he gets a great one.
Yep. I know that you love the Cleveland pass catchers. So we've got Jerry Jeudy coming in at 19% ownership, Elijah Moore coming in at 15%. I'm assuming we don't need to worry about any of the other receivers on Cleveland. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but who do you prefer? Do you have a preference between Jeudy and Elijah Moore, or is it just wheels up for both?
Yeah, again, this is weird. It's like what I wrote up in the everything report, where it's, hey, just keep in mind with Jerry Jeudy is that this is a very spread out passing tree. So since Winston took over, Judy averages 16.4 XFP per game, to Elijah Moore's 16.1, to Cedric Tillman's 16.0 in full games, to David Njoku's 14.1. That means all these guys are tremendous values. They're great XFP related values, but like, see how narrow that is between them. But ... Why is the guy who just had 235 receiving yards not the highest owned wide receiver this slate, right? Like, generally, you have a performance like that, it means you're going to start to get alpha-like volume, which he hasn't had. It's been way more spread out. Elijah and Njoku actually out-targeted him last week. Typically, you have a performance like that, it leads to more volume, but it's also like, who has the most upside? It's the guy who just had 235 receiving yards. He has over 150 more than any other receiver over the last 3 weeks. And so I like both. But I think Judy, even with the threat of a Joey Porter Jr. shadow, he didn't shadow 2 weeks ago. I think he's probably going to shadow this week. I think he's an awesome play. Yeah. It's kind of weird that, again, guy with 235 receiving yards isn't mega chalk.
Yep. So you prefer Judy over Moore, but I think you still like Moore at 4,800.
Yeah.
Okay. Sandwich between them, Puka Nacua coming in at 15% ownership. He's 7,700. Any interest in Puka or Cooper Kupp at 10% own?
Not really. Didn't feel strongly enough about either one to write them up. I will say it's a slot funnel matchup, which benefits Cooper Kupp. The schematic zone heavy matchup might also benefit Cooper Kupp. But it's also just a tough matchup in general against the Bills.
Yep. Not a priority for me. Justin Jefferson coming in at 14% owned at 7,800. Any interest there?
I think he's great if you have the stack, but for one-offs, I don't like it as much. I honestly prefer Jordan Addison, and I did write both of them up. I mean, just at cost and ownership, but you look at what Jefferson's done this year. He has one game with double-digit targets. He did that in 7 of 8 full games last year. He has a season high of 26.3 DraftKings fantasy points, less than Jordan Addison's season high, and he exceeded that mark in 6 of 8 full games last year. He's just not who he was last year.
No, the problem his quarterback is not who he was last year.
Fair. And it's also the defense is better, which reduces volume. Yeah. But, I've been reading off these stats every single week and then saying, but it feels like the 40 burger is going to come at any single point. And so maybe it comes this week against the Falcons defense that's giving up the second most fantasy points per game to number one receivers this year. AJ Terrell is going to shadow. That's great. Terrell stinks this year. So maybe the wish casting finally hits. But to me, I feel a little bit better about Addison. He's been on a bit of a hot streak of late. He's also seen an increase in usage, 92% route share in back-to-back games, up from about 77%. They both get a top 3 matchup, a little bit more favorable schematically for Addison, also like cornerback matchup wise. And so I like him, 5,300, 9, what is it? 7%?
7%, so, yeah.
Yeah.
I am playing a ton of Justin Jefferson this week, but I am also a homer, so like I acknowledge that. But chat is with me. The chat loves everybody talking about this is going to be Justin Jefferson's week. It's just like a feeling.
I hate that.
It's just like he's so due. He's so due. Come on, Scott.
There's no analytics for that.
I know that there is no analytics. Just straight up, just like he's the best receiver in football, and he's playing against his old quarterback. Like Kirk Cousins on the other side. Maybe they're a little bit more. I don't know. I'm just making shit up. I just want to play Justin Jefferson because I am a Vikings homer, and he has to score 40 at some point. So I'm into it. But admittedly, I don't.
To your point, he is very, very due.
Yeah. We got a question. What about George Pickens? I mean, George Pickens coming in at 4% owned at 6,800. In your Cleveland stacks, are you throwing it, putting Pickens on the other side, or just as a one-off? How do you like Pickens?
Yeah, 4% is kind of crazy. I think he's an awesome play. You really need to read Ryan's advanced matchups. His blurb on George Pickens was an absolute thing of beauty. So we knew he flopped in this spot a few weeks back. It was sort of outlierish in the sense that his catchable target rate like cratered. It was, worse than half his average with Russell Wilson, but the volume is still there. It's a perfect schematic matchup. Pickens is one of these like 6 guys where the schematic matchup matters far more than anything else, including like the on paper matchup, the cornerback matchup. And so single high coverage, he's a top 2. It's him and AJ Brown as the best wide receivers in football or fantasy against single high. It's a really good game environment. I worry about this hamstring injury that popped up on Friday, but it didn't sound too serious based on his interviews later that day.
Yep. Wait, sorry, that is Pickens has a hamstring injury?
Yeah. Limited practice on Friday with a hamstring, but he talked to the media afterwards and it seemed like he was okay. It just hamstrings make me really nervous, especially and late week injuries as well.
Speaking of injuries,
that was like a Ryan Heath was like, I told him to do a video and like hammer Pickens ladders. His blurb on that was just, super compelling,
Killed
super
it.
convincing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's good. He's good. That Ryan Heath. Scott Barrett Jr. Mike Evans also dealing with some injuries. I think now expected to play at this point. Like I think he's like they've said he's going to play this week. But I want to hear your thoughts on Mike Evans. And then also D-Bro's boy this week is Sterling Shepard. He convinced me to draft him in the cage match. So I'm on team Sterling Shepard.
Was D-Bro on the cage match this week?
No, he was not the guest. He was just in chat I asked him who should I take. And
when are you getting him as a guest?
He's already been I have not been able to get him as a guest because D-Bro is way too busy. He's just like a lot of fantasy football guys I found, and I thought the fantasy football guys would be the easy ones. All the fantasy football guys are like, no, I'm busy. I'm like, what are you talking about? Wednesday night. I'm like, that's day 3 of my research for the main slate. So they're tough to get, and D-Bro has been the toughest. He don't want this smoke. He's scared of me. All right. So how do you feel about Mike Evans? How do you feel about Sterling Shepard?
Yeah, I wrote up so Shepard is interesting. I wrote him up and tried to make the argument, and I didn't find it convincing enough to keep him in the article. One argument would be the Raiders playing a lot of too high, but I talked to Ryan about that. Didn't seem like that was sticky. Really, it's just like fluctuated wildly week to week. Shepard does rank top 10 in targets per route run the last, 2 or 3 weeks, but it's also, he's not a full-time route share player. I don't know. 7 targets in back-to-back games, and he hasn't done anything all year. I think he's vaguely in play, but wasn't strong enough to make my pool. Evans, however, was a top 5 cash play for me. He's scored over 23 DraftKings fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. He was on pace for like 180 yards in that Giants game that wasn't ever competitive. You have the narrative that he needs to break Jerry Rice's record of consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Baker said the team would love for him to get that. Seems like a real narrative. And it's just, we saw what Cade Otton did without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin. I just think like absolute alpha number 1 volume and usage for a player who's great. Like at his age, it's insane. I think he either ranks top 3 or leads all players in AS this year. So really like Mike Evans.
Yep. Totally with you. And we had we gave the stat last week, which I was fed misinformation. I said it on the show that this is something that I was told that I did not double check. And the stat we were given was he needs 120 yards per game to break that record. Turned out that was because the schedule he was looking at was missing a game. So there was, he actually only needs like 95 or something rest of the way for Mike Evans to get that 1,000-yard bonus. So hopefully he's healthy enough to get there, because I would love for Mike Evans. I'm going to play a lot of Mike Evans this week. But the concern, of course, is the health. D-Bro giving all of the reasons to want Sterling Shepard. Raiders versus Slot. I pulled it up here, and it's I can't see it quite right, but it's like top 8 or so matchup slot receivers versus It's this one higher, 7.
It's probably Nate Hobbs is out.
So it's even better than I would assume.
Yeah.
So it's a nice matchup for slot receivers. Debro points out Shep has a 27% first read target share the last 2 games for red zone targets. So
he does.
He's thrown those numbers out there. I'll probably play a bit of Sterling Shepard. I already drafted him on the in the cage match. So I'm already in on some Sterling Shepard, but also just love Mike Evans. I'm totally with you there. What about the Tennessee guys? So like elite matchup against Jacksonville across the board. Sounded like you're not super into Will Levis. We have Calvin Ridley getting 14% ownership at 5,700. And then, of course, we have Nick Westbrook-Ikine, who just scores touchdowns every game. He's up to 4,700, 4% ownership. How much interest do you have, if any, in Ridley, and then any interest in Nick Westbrook-Ikine?
No, it's an amazing, perfect spot for both of them. And Will Levis was more just like, I'd rather make the bet on an AOC double with Evans bring back than Levis at much higher ownership. But no, it's a best possible matchup on paper, best possible matchup schematically. It's Jaguars are the worst deep pass defense in football, which is how Calvin Ridley and NWI are scoring all their points. And Ridley's like a lot better, like his numbers are a lot better than they might look. If you just credited him with one 51-yard touchdown catch that was nullified by an illegal formation penalty, then he'd have 5+ catches and 70+ receiving yards in 5 of his last 6 games, averaging like 17.3 fantasy points per game over that span. Has had some tough matchups, Derek Stingley's shadow coverage, some bad schematic matchups. And again, this one is perfect. Couldn't be any more perfect for both like his archetype and just like any wide receiver. And so he could go off. Tyson Campbell, their CB1 is questionable too. Like if he's out, you could boost him even further. And then Westbrook, like nothing about what he's doing looks real or sustainable. He has 8 touchdowns on 20 receptions. He ranks 4th in receiving touchdowns, like 180th in receptions this year. But since he started earning a snap share over 50%, he's averaging 15.1 DraftKings fantasy points per game. That would rank 9th best on the slate. He's priced as the wide receiver 37. And again, it's a perfect matchup for him. So I could see that. I could see Levis doubles hitting in a big way in the matchup. But I also like Tony Pollard a lot. Jaguars just stacked with Titans defense. Jaguars just might not show up.
Yep. All right. What else? What else do we like here? Maybe I should just open it up to you at this point. We've talked about all of the chalk, some of the more interesting plays. So maybe do you want to just tell me about some of the plays you like here?
Yeah, I think DJ Moore deserves a really strong shout out. You saw what he did last week, right? On Thanksgiving. He's banged up, dealing with a quad injury. He's going to play. In the everything report, I wrote like 1,000 words on this. And it's, you can't have any like super high level of conviction in any of these Chicago wide receivers because a different one has led the team in target share in each of the last 3 weeks. But screw it. I'm going to do that anyway. The first 2 weeks, I'm like, DJ Moore's in this weird like Laviska Shenault role where he's seeing like 4 to 6 design targets, but he's not seeing anything else. If he were to just start seeing more intermediate and deep targets, he could be a league wrecker. And then what do we see on Thanksgiving is he still had a number of screen targets, which is great for your floor, but including plays negated due to penalty, he had 6 deep targets. And so that right there means like, if that holds this week, and maybe it doesn't because of the injury or it was just a weird week, he would offer one of the highest floors, ceilings, and median projections in fantasy. And so no one's really gravitated. And like I said, with Caleb is you're seeing the Bears lean more pass heavy. It looks like a spot, especially with the running back injuries where they should do that. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of upside there and people aren't really talking about him.
We didn't really talk about Caleb. Do you have any interest in doing like Caleb double stacks, anything like that?
I thought we did talk Caleb.
Oh, did we? Maybe I missed.
Keenan, I'm not really willing to buy into the notion that he's real because he just had like back-to-back best possible slot matchups. But like maybe, he's Keenan Allen. And then Rome is like, you look at XFP, he's awesome, but no wide receiver has been hurt more by poor quarterback play than Rome. He ranks like 11th in air yards, and he ranks like 60th in catchable air yards below Keenan. It's just Caleb's been the worst deep passer in the game this year by a landslide. So I just don't think like his role is a great fit for the offense. So barring anything changing, I don't feel great about either one, but like it would make sense to dub stack just based on like the raw volume we're seeing from Caleb of late. So maybe don't have the best read there.
Okay. All right. What else? What else do we want to play here?
We also, I think JSN and DK Metcalf are worth talking about. I would give, just because JSN leads all wide receivers in fantasy points per route run since week 9. Talked about how it doesn't really totally feel real or sustainable. It's still Metcalf dominating first read targets, but just the production we've seen for, a player who was, very highly regarded by me and other people when he was drafted. He has the better on paper matchup, the better schematic matchup. And we know there's upside to this offense. And then we got to talk Adam Thielen. We nailed Thielen last week, right? So
That's right.
Why not again? He would have had 9 catches, 108 yards, and 2 touchdowns if not for a robbery from the referees last week. That was at him being less than 100%. He missed a lot of practice time earlier in the week, had just a 74% snap share. Now he's off the injury report. He's practicing full. He was a top 10 wide receiver by fantasy points per game through the first 10 weeks of last season. It's not a good matchup, but it is a slot funnel matchup. So could be a spot where we see a lot of Thielen. Yeah.
With Malik Neighbors out, we got this question earlier, and I think it's a good one. Who
is he confirmed out?
No, I don't think it's confirmed. That's good point. So if Malik Neighbors is out, I guess is how I should be phrasing this. If he ends up sitting, then do you like Darius Slayton?
I think.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, I think Slayton would be a must play, easy cash play lock. I keep doing this stat. I just like it a lot. If you include one 56-yard catch that was negated due to penalty in the 2 games without Neighbors, Slayton would have averaged 11.5 targets, 118 yards, 22 XFP, and 24 fantasy points per game. And so he steps seamlessly into the Neighbors role. I know quarterback play has gotten a lot worse, but that's a sickeningly valuable role. And then the Saints are giving up 22 DraftKings fantasy points per game to wide receiver ones since Marshawn Lattimore got hurt. So I like it a lot. I think he's an awesome value if we get no Neighbors. This offense just might be dead. It's so, I talked about power law offenses like the Browns, the Giants are the antithesis of that. But 4,300 for the Malik Neighbors role, and Slayton rocked with it. And Slayton's always been awesome when he's stepped up. It's just for some reason multiple coaching regimes hate him inexplicably. But yeah, great play.
I feel like I don't even need to ask you about Wan'Dale Robinson because I just know what you're going to say.
I just hate him so much, dude.
Scott's not going to play into Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he's cheap. So I think he's 4,800. So I think he's more interesting than you think he is, but also I didn't even write him up. And I don't know how much I actually get to Wan'Dale Robinson. I might get a little bit just because he's so cheap.
I would rather cut off my big toe on my left foot than win $1 million playing Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah, no, I believe you. I believe that is true. I personally would take the $1 million with Wan'Dale Robinson. So there's where we stand on this issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Marvin Harrison, 5% ownership, 6,000.
He's interesting, man. We've seen the spike weeks from him. There are some schematic stuff to the mashup that would favor him, although it didn't really work out 2 weeks ago. And then you had that narrative where it's the offense is going to run through him, and he had a season high targets, don't really buy it. Nothing about his usage really changed. First read target share was still really low. I don't know. I wrote him up and then it didn't make my final pass. I get it. 6% or 5%, 6K.
Steven wants to know about Parker Washington. We saw Parker Washington show out last week. Is he just Mac Jones's favorite receiver? How do you feel about Parker Washington?
Yeah, I did write him up, and I almost wrote a BTJ too, where the argument for BTJ is just like, dude, BTJ is awesome. Like he's so sick. He would have broke the slate if just like 2 of his wide open deep targets were remotely catchable. And he had a bunch of them. Yeah, I did go with Parker Washington just because he's 1%. He's 4,400. It's kind of tough to find sub 5K wide receiver values. Maybe you have a little bit of the backup connection at play with Mac Jones. And then it's also like Titans defense kind of sells out to stop the deep ball. By the way, they've also struggled these last 5 weeks against wide receivers, but they're sort of designed to stop the deep ball. So you could argue that Hurts BTJ helps Parker Washington, who is in a sort of like a hybrid Ingram BTJ role last week. He's never done anything else throughout his career. Mac Jones sucks. But I mean, 4,400, 1%, 12 targets, 28 fantasy points last week. I like that.
We talked about him on the morning show I was on last week, and I made fun of Parker Washington as somebody my co-host has been in on several times this year, because he had, coming into last week, 0.79 yards per route run, just so atrocious from that metric, all the way up to 1.12, like jumped drastically. 1.18 jumped drastically with his big game last week, so suddenly doesn't look quite as horrible as he did.
Yeah, Joe Dolan was all in on Parker Washington last week. Shout out to him. Really? Yeah, so like I thought about it, but I thought Devin Duvernay was going to get the slot role, and that was really the matchup. You wanted that slot but he didn't get the slot role, and he just went off anyway. So
yeah, good for him. Who else?
Talking about Joe Dolan, who's been crushing with these sub 4K wide receivers. His quote unquote skank wide receiver of the week is Calvin Austin. It's just like a great matchup. It's an absolute slot funnel matchup. This could be a situation where Pittsburgh gets pushed like he did last week. Says he's going to play. He was kind of ripping a little bit last week before the concussion. So 3,300, 2% owned. I think he deserves a shout out.
Yep. I had a good amount of Calvin Austin last week. Just looking at there we go. Last week, obviously was concussed, only 32%, but he was up to 68% route participation in the game prior to that. So looks playable here, especially if you are doing those game stacks, as I know you like that game. You talked about playing Jalen Hurts as a pivot off of leverage off of Saquon Barkley. Would you play either of AJ Brown or Devonta Smith along with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think you could play AJ Brown. Nuts matchup. Yeah, listen, like serious volume concerns, because against the Ravens, the number one pass funnel in the league, Hurts had 9 completions last week. So, but I mean, hey, he could just rip off an 80-yard touchdown and also catch like a 23-yard ball on boom, 100+ yards and a touchdown at halftime, and then he gets shut down. But 2% upside there, great matchup. How sick would it be if Carolina pushed the Eagles? This dude's betting 3.1 million on the Eagles to win, and
somebody's betting 3.1 million on the Eagles to win.
Yeah,
it would be sick if we play Adam Thielen, and Adam Thielen is the reason that they push him. If they're scoring any other way, I'm probably screwed, because I don't think I'm playing anybody else from the Panthers. Right. So only from that perspective, it would be sick. All right, who else? Let's see. You playing either of the Jets receivers, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams?
No, man, they pop an XFP so hard. Like the Bengals, Raiders, Jets, like this condensed target volume that's like really good target. It's just Rodgers has been so bad. There's going to be 1 week where where he has a great game and those guys go off. Oh, Rams are also in that conversation, by the way, but just so hard to trust.
We kind of already talked about the Dolphins receivers when we were talking about Tua, but sounds like you have some interest in Tyreek Hill, or I mean, it sounds like you have more interest in like Jonnu and Devin Achane. What is your level of interest then in Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle?
I mean, Tyreek could go off. It's like, even if we admit he's lost a step, still like 80% of like one of the best wide receivers I've ever seen play football. Right. But even like he had his best game since week 1 on Thanksgiving. And even with that, it came on a touchdown that deflected off of Jonnu Smith's hands into his in the end zone. Without that, it looked like a much lesser impressive performance. Waddle has twice as many 100-yard games this year. He gets quarters coverage, which he shreds. Waddle against the Jets last year made me a bunch of money. But ultimately, no, it's just like a different offense. It like runs through Jonnu Smith as the number 1 receiver, and then Devon Achane getting a shit ton of design work. And the offense is better off for it. Like, they're crushing these last 3 weeks. And so I would want to lean into, I think, Jonnu as like putting up Tyreek numbers, not priced like it. So that's kind of how I'd play it. But you could fit any of those guys. Achane probably my preference, or Waddle or Tyreek to make it a double, but I don't know.
Okay.
Feels thin on its own.
Steven wants to know if you think Amari Cooper going to get rewarded for his touchdown throwback to Josh Allen from lateral to Josh Allen from last week. Do you have any interest in Amari Cooper? And what about Khalil Shakir while we're on the subject of the Bills receivers?
Khalil Shakir, I think, is in no man's land, where he's just not quite good enough for cash, but he doesn't have the ceiling for tournaments. Even if he does project as a value. Is Keon Coleman back?
I don't think we know yet.
Yeah.
But am I wrong about that?
TLDR is just like, there's no upside in this offense. Bills ranked dead last in catchable air yards per game. Just not how the offense works. So it feels thin to me.
Yeah.
But they're in good spots, Keon or Cooper. It's a great matchup.
Do you have any other wide receivers that you are enthusiastic about this week?
I don't think so.
All right. Just scrolling real quick, making sure I'm not missing anybody important to me. MVS at 4,600. Any interest there?
I thought about it. It's same thing with like NWI, is like, this doesn't feel real. This doesn't feel sustainable, but he gets a single high heavy matchup. Like, he shreds single high. I probably won't play it. I think having NWI in my article is gross enough.
Somebody asked earlier about Jalen McMillan. I have not even looked at the game log here.
No, I think D-Bro's right. You would play Shep.
Okay. All right. I think that we've gone through all of the receivers that I had any interest in talking about. Crazy Coop says Tyler Boyd from the Titans. I don't know. That's I think he's
done nothing all year. No.
Treylon Burks is out, so I think that's the reason he's bringing him up. But I don't think that really affects him that much.
It's that outside matchup for BTJ and WI.
We already talked about Devontae Smith a bit. I think
I have no interest. It's really AJ Brown as that alpha on a low pass volume offense.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on and look at some tight end plays. And we've got some chalk here at the top. It's a pay up kind of week in terms of the chalk, at least. Brock Bowers coming in at 20%, Trey McBride 15%, Kate Otten 15%, TJ Hawkinson 15%, David Njoku 13%, Evan Ingram 10%. Johnny Smith, man, look at all of the top in terms of projected ownership. All the top tight ends are the expensive tight ends. But let's start with Brock Bowers at the top. He's 6,500, getting 20% ownership. How much interest do you have in Brock Bowers?
Dude, Bowers is fucking awesome. He's the greatest tight end prospect of all time, having not just the greatest rookie tight end season ever, but one of the greatest rookie receiver seasons ever. He leads all players in receptions. He's playing his best football most recently. It's a good matchup, especially now with Jordan Whitehead out. His direct backups also out. He's my cash tight end play of the week. And I thought it was gonna be really tough for me, where I was like hemming and hawing on Bowers versus Jonnu, and like ownership made it so easy. It's Bowers and Cash. Jonnu, far and away, going to be my highest owned tight end in tournaments. I wrote a bunch of words on this. It's Jonnu is having the season that Ingram and Njoku had at the end of last year, where they were in the winning Millie lineup like every week for like the last 6 weeks, putting up wide receiver 1 numbers at a position and a price tag we're expecting like, I don't know, high-end wide receiver 4 production from. And it's almost like Jonnu Smith is who you drafted Tyreek Hill to be. Just like everything about the usage, the production, and the fact that it's working. How great this Miami offense has been with Jonnu, which I never saw coming, as the number 1 receiver. So at that price tag, with that ownership, I think he's elite play.
Yep, Jonnu looks very strong. So Bowers and Jonnu sound like are your favorites. Trey McBride coming in at 15% owned, 6,100. Do you have any interest there?
It comes down to this, Neil. It's if he scored touchdowns, like he would be the best play ever.
It'd be Brock Bowers in that case.
Yeah. Well, Bowers actually hasn't scored a lot of touchdowns either, but or you just never play the guy who doesn't score touchdowns.
I do play the guy who's never scored touchdowns because I mean, come on.
He's due.
He's good. He's due.
Let's
play all the guys who are due. Yeah.
What if this is the week where everything comes due? So if you just spotted him 4 additional receiving yards twice, he would have season highs of 28, 25, 24, 21, 19 DraftKings fantasy points. That's 23 DraftKings fantasy points per game in his top 50% of games. He scores touchdowns. You're talking about 30 fantasy points in his top 50% of games. I don't love him. I get it. Really, I like Bowers more. I like Jonnu more, but for sure as one of the top 5 best tight end plays.
Yeah. K. Dotton, we've already talked about a bit, but he's 4,400. We're assuming that Mike Evans is in at this point, so the sample size with Evans out, I guess, is less relevant here. But if he's at all limited, we see K. Dotton, take on a bigger role. Also has 10 targets since Mike Evans came back in 2 games. So like not a zero role here. How much interest do we have in K. Dotton?
I like him more than Sterling Shepard. I'll say that. Dotton has never done anything in his career when Mike Evans has been healthy ever. But I mean, he did flash like unreal upside when Evans was out. And so maybe he's just, the number 2 role, but that could still be a valuable role. We just haven't seen it these last few weeks with Tampa leaning more run heavy. But if they don't, if that flips, like we were talking about with Baker, really good expectation, insane upside in the matchup. Raiders since week 8 gave up 31 DK to Jonnu, 30 to Gesicki, 25 to Kelsey. So, I get why he's projecting as well as he is.
And then TJ Hawkinson has been back for, I think, 5 games now. The usage has been pretty good in recent weeks. 8 targets 2 weeks ago, just 4 targets last week on 67% route participation. But Vikings, nice matchup with the Falcons. Any interest in TJ Hawkinson at 4,300, 15% ownership?
Yeah, this is one Jake and I went back and forth on. I think Jake is like, you can't really play him at 15%. He's just not a good play, especially with Josh Oliver back. I get that. He's had 70 plus receiving yards and 9 plus targets in 2 of his last 4. And so like tight end's a gross position. So to have that sort of upside as like, let's say a 50% outcome, I get leaning into that. I think that's strong. I think that's fine. But usage really hasn't been great. And now Josh Oliver's back. So maybe that takes a hit.
I don't know what to make of Josh Oliver. Like, I don't know that it matters. Like,
right.
Like,
I'm with you.
Is the better tight end? Like, why do we care that the backup tight end is available here?
And I think they were easing him back, and now he's good to go. But it's still like, even last week without Oliver, he was just like a 70% route share when he was, or maybe 65, and he was at like 80% when healthy the year previous. I don't know.
Yeah. Sure, it might cut into like a couple routes run or something, but I'm not sure it makes that much of an impact. Njoku, you like the Cleveland stacks? You included Njoku in those stacks?
Of course. Love me some Jameis. Dude had 16 targets last week. Come on.
Yeah, insane.
It's also like, so he sucked ass against the Steelers 2 weeks ago, but they do profile as a tight end funnel.
Yeah, looks good. What about you don't really love Juwan Jennings at pretty significant ownership. What about Kittle as a pivot off of Jennings?
I thought you were going to say Juwan Johnson because their names are similar for some reason. I don't know. Not really. I love Kittle. He, like, unrivaled upside at the position. Scores touchdowns, unlike McBride, which is great. Tough matchup. No Trent Williams. I don't know. I'm kind of writing off these 49ers as dead. But like I said, the Mike Clay thing, it's Kyle Shanahan. He's done well with worse, right? So I don't know. He didn't make my pool, but I can't ever hate on George Kittle.
Are they officially eliminated from the playoffs? I think they still have like a 1%, like sub 1% chance, but like still theoretically live. Yeah, I don't know. I think they're still playing to win, probably.
We're theoretically live to win a milli this week, Neil.
We are. We're going to win a milli. We're gonna build it on this show very soon. What we're gonna do, Scott, is we're gonna make the all due lineup, just all players that are due right now for positive regression. Do any other? I mean, do you want to talk about Juwan Johnson? Any other tight ends here?
Yeah. So Johnson, I mean, it's tough to make this argument because like he's done nothing all year. In games without Taysom, Foster Moreau actually outscored him, but he had a season high 7 targets last week, season high 77% route share. And it's just one of those things where when you do projections, there's just literally nowhere else for the ball to go. So you like click on fantasy points per dollar on the projections. It's like we're being as conservative as possible, and he's still top 5 value.
Yeah, seems pretty good. Like seems playable at that number. Do you think you get to any Juwan?
Yeah, when you're talking about the 3,400 guy versus a bunch of 4,400 and above, it's really just how much you like the rest of your lineup. So I imagine I'll have like a lineup where he's the only one who fits, and I'll play that.
Power says Nick Bosa is out. I think we knew that, or at least maybe that was at least my expectation that Nick Bosa was going to miss another game. But that's good to have that confirmation. Pitts, any interest in Kyle Pitts against the Vikings?
No. Why are you asking me about Kyle Pitts?
Because somebody brought it up in chat. Somebody brought it up in chat, so I'm just saying. All right.
Kyle Pitts hasn't been relevant, and dude, Jonnu Smith takeover. I can't believe I was begging Arthur Smith to stop playing Jonnu. Little did I know, Jonnu's better than Tyreek randomly.
Turns out he's just really, really good. All right. I think that's it as far as tight ends go. Let's make some lineups.
Let's do it. Let's do it, baby. So like I've been saying, I feel like I've over-levered for like the entire 2024 season. But I kind of want to make a fade cheap running backs lineup.
Girl Lansing says, positive regression, also known as progression. Why is every single DFS tout this stupid and say this? Sorry that my vocabulary does not.
No, actually, positive regression is like a real
standards.
thing you're allowed to say, Neil.
Right, and it's also just like people understand it. So
yeah,
but
no, positive regression is actually different from progression.
That's what I thought. I thought it was an actual different thing, but also I don't care that.
I don't know. I've had this debate multiple times. But
I have also like heard this debate multiple times, and I just don't care that much.
Exactly.
Like I use the words that people understand, so I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to communicate. Anyway, let's move on. Let's make some lineups. Do you want to start this one?
All right, fine. AOC, Bowers, Jacoby, Evans.
All right. Bowers, Jacoby, Evans. Easy. 51.80 left per player. Easy to do with all the value at running back.
Yeah, fuck it, Charbonnet.
All right. Do you have a defense you like?
Saints, Kamara, we'll just go Mega Chalk.
Are we
just said
Saints? Kamara. Yeah, we can make this work. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. What are you thinking? 5,100.
Go with one
Judy.
of your. Yeah, I was going to say Judy or Elijah Moore.
Let's see what we can do.
All right, let's throw Judy in there.
How much is he?
Then we have 4,500 left, so we can't get to any of the.
You can play one of those tight ends. What about we just go even chalkier and we play Garendo
And not Judy?
I don't know, Neil.
Let's see what we can get at wide receiver if we play Garendo in the flex. Then we can play, if we play Elijah Moore, we can fit Garendo.
Boom. There you go.
Easy peasy. All right.
I said since before Elijah Moore was drafted, he was going to win me a Millie Maker 1 week. Maybe it's
time. It is time. All right. Let's go. So we get Aiden O'Connell with Jacoby Myers, with Brock Bowers, Mike Evans on the bring back, Zach Charbonnet, Elvin Kamara, Isaac Garendo, Elijah Moore, Saints defense. There you go. Used up all the salary. It's a beauty. Correlates well. I'm a fan. We got the defense with the running back. Just a beauty. Came right together. All right. Let's do another one. So now we're playing for second place because we just won a milli with that one. Okay. Am I doing the all do lineup now? The positive regression lineup, as some call it. Let's do a
Trey McBride scores 2 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson has a 40-point game.
So I was debating on. So we definitely need to start with Jefferson, and then I'm going to force you. This is my lineup, Scott. I'm going to force you to play some Drake London.
That's a good do guy.
So I was debating between Jalen Hurts or Kirk Cousins as the quarterback here, because Jalen Hurts didn't get it last week. This is very much but I don't know that he fits with Justin Jefferson. It's going to be too expensive. So I think we just go Kirk Cousins in this lineup.
Why Kirk over Darnold?
Is Darnold that due?
I mean,
we're just talking about Kirk has
the better
thrown
play.
6 interceptions and 0 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks. So
but he's due for a benching.
Man, I hope he doesn't get. I need him this week. He's my only quarterback on one of my eliminator teams, so I need Kirk to have a game this week. So that's
then you got to hedge. Yeah, then you can't play him.
Oh, I see. So I'll go. All right, fine. Sam Darnold also more expensive, and also super owned.
So here's your choices. I'm gonna force you into a double.
Okay.
Do you want Addison or do you want Mooney or Bijan?
Yeah, I was thinking possibly Bijan. Addison definitely is not due, and this is the all due lineup. Addison's been crushing it, so I don't think that it's Addison from that standpoint. I guess we don't need to do everything all due. It's just gonna be a bad lineup if we choose all the players that are due. So let's go.
Okay.
Let's go Bijan. And let's go Kirk. All right. Okay. 45-60 left per player. Defense, I mean, I don't know what defenses do. I'm just going to play a cheap one. The Steelers obviously the best defense this week, but let's see. Maybe the Browns, 2,400. Intercept one of those moon balls. Saints
I like. Giants are no Dexter Lawrence, maybe not. Saints are far and away the best defense to me.
All right, I'll just do them. Okay.
Titans are close.
How much are the Titans?
2,800.
Oh, they're cheaper. All right, let's go that way.
Pollard?
Yeah, then because they're Pollard in here. Okay. Tight end. We're not going to be able to afford Bowers, I don't think. So let's try Jonnu. He still might be too expensive, but we can try it. So now we're going to need a really cheap receiver to be able to fit Charbonnet and flex.
Who was Debro's guy?
Sterling Shepard.
Shepard, Calvin Austin,
We only have 3,500
Parker
left.
Washington. Oh, there's Jalen McMillan who we talked
There
about.
is Jalen
Calvin
McMillan.
Austin, 3,300.
Yeah, go Kevin Austin.
Or you can take out Janu. You can play Juwan.
It's kind of interesting. Or like Hawkinson hasn't really had a game yet. Throw him into the game stack.
No, he has. But
Has he? Since he came back?
yeah, he has 2 great games, 2 shitty games in his last 4. Or he 7 catches, 114, 8 catches, 72.
Oh, you're right. Okay, yeah. Jalen Waddle.
I mean,
Adam Thielen.
No, fuck it. So Thielen's nice, Addison's nice. Yeah, why not just fully onslaught it? Throw Addison in there too, or
throw Addison in there. I see it. Okay. All right, you want to go?
Or how much is Mooney? More than Addison, right?
Mooney is 56, 5,500. All right, so we can go Jawan. Yeah, Mooney's 55, so we missed that by 100. We could upgrade by downgrading the defense, so we could get to Mooney over Addison. But this also works. We've got a double stack with a double bring back as is. I think that looks pretty good.
Okay.
So we have Kirk Cousins with Bijan Robinson and Drake London, bringbacks of Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. We have Tony Pollard in there with the Titans defense, Juwan Johnson, and then Zach Charbonnet closing it out. We leave 100 on the table. Looks good. Looks like another Millie Maker winner. And then if we do one together, I think it sounded like you and I are both pretty in on Baker. Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Can you stack him with Bucky? Is that in play?
Bucky's been pretty involved in the passing game, right? So
yeah,
I would say
wish
yes.
he didn't have this injury.
This is how I'm inclined to start this one, but we could, if you want me to take out Shepard and put in Bucky, you can convince me.
I like Otten more than Shep too, but
double tight end, probably sort of contrarian to have both the tight ends.
Bowers over Jacoby. Do we want Jacoby? Is that 2 onslaught?
I think we could go Jacoby too. Do I want to think about it?
Yeah.
All right. Let's put our defense in here.
Let's do a Najee Steelers team.
Okay.
YOLO.
3,500 Steelers. Najee is 6,000. I mean, we could put in 2 of the chalky running backs plus Jerry Jeudy, I think.
Okay.
If we wanted to.
Do it.
We might even have more money left over here. All right, so Charbonnet. Put in like Garendo. Oh, you want to put on? Oh,
I
Kamara.
thought that's what you meant by chalky. Yeah, no, we can't afford that.
We would have 3,600 left over. We put Kamara in there. So if we can find a 3,600 wide receiver, we could.
Probably not.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of gross. Yeah, I was thinking like Garendo or Braylon Allen.
Okay. Yeah, play Garendo.
Then we have 6,200 left over for DK Metcalf, DJ Moore. DJ Moore?
Yeah, why not?
Leaves 100 on the table. Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans and Sterling Shepard. Bring back of Brock Bowers. We've got Najee Harris with the Steelers defense. Zach Charbonnet, 1 off. DJ Moore, 1 off. Isaac Garendo, 1 off. And there you have it. Looks good. Looks like another winner.
We did
it. We did 3 lineups. Beauty.
First, second, third.
First, second, and third. We're going to win so much money this weekend. All right, that's going to do it. Scott, we've been through the show. What do you have coming up beyond this show for the rest of the weekend? Where can people find your stuff?
I'm going to watch a bunch of UFC later tonight. I'm going to do the Sunday update tomorrow morning. Going to hang out in Discord. So be on the lookout for that. What about you, Neil?
Yeah, I think I've entered some lineups in UFC and I've not even looked at the slate, so I have to figure out what I'm doing there. I don't even know if I have an optimizer that can make 150 lineups for UFC right now, so I've figured that out in the next hour. And then tomorrow I will be posting my Sunday Night Football right up at Fantasy Points. That'll be behind the paywall, and of course I'll be on my own YouTube channel breaking that game down 85 minutes prior to lock as well on Sunday night. So check out the Flaniverse YouTube if you have not already done so. That's it. That's what I've got going on. All right. Well, this was fun. And of course, winning $1 million with my friend Scott tomorrow. This has been fun. Thank you, Scott, as usual.
Yeah, make sure you guys tune in for the live stream of us sweating the Millie when we're top 5 with 5 minutes left.
Yeah, that'll be fun. You'll have to join me on my channel because that'll be during my show. So you'll have to come on the show and we'll sweat while talking about Sunday Night Football. All right. Thank you all for hanging out with us throughout this show. It's been fun as usual. We'll be back next week. I will be in Nashville. I think I'll be able to make it work. I'm planning on doing the show from Nashville next Saturday. But yeah, look out for that next Saturday on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel. Thanks for hanging out, guys. We'll catch you next week.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.